My name is Eleanor Vance. I was 69 years old on the night my only son asked me to quietly erase myself. He didn't use those exact words, of course. People who are about to do something monstrous rarely use the proper terminology. Instead, he said it over a plate of rosemary lamb chops while his wife smoothly topped off my wine glass. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mom, we need you to take early retirement. The cost of private infant care is bleeding us dry. It's the only logical choice." I didn't say a word. I just placed my hands flat on top of the vintage leather briefcase sitting right next to my dinner plate. I didn't open it. Not yet. My son and his wife thought the most agonizing part of that dinner was going to be my refusal. They were wrong. The most agonizing part was a secret already buried deep within their own bank statements, and in the chillingly quiet decision they had already made regarding my home. Welcome back to the mother's voice, where women who were written off as winding down finally get the last devastating word. If you believe that a quiet voice and an undeniable receipt sound like absolute justice, you are exactly where you belong. Drop a comment below and make sure you're subscribed. Because tonight we are looking at the math behind a betrayal. The invitation had arrived via a curt text message on a random Tuesday. "Sunday dinner, Mom. 6 p.m. sharp. It's critical." My son Julian never used the word critical. He called when he needed a wire transfer, and he texted when his conscience was bothering him. I am a forensic accountant. 42 years in the business. I still wake up at 5 a.m. to analyze corporate balance sheets before I touch my coffee. When society looks at a woman my age, they assume she is fading into the background. I always let them assume. It gives me a massive tactical advantage. That very week, a bulky overnight envelope had landed in my mailbox. It was a standard mortgage verification packet, or so it seemed. I slid the pages into my worn, oxblood red leather portfolio and brought it to dinner without entirely deciding why. When I pulled up to their gated community, past the perfectly manicured lawns and the security guard who waved me through, I noticed 2 brand new luxury SUVs sitting in the driveway. I also noticed a third sedan. It belonged to Beatrice, my daughter-in-law's mother. I sat in my car for a full minute, watching the silhouette of my own daughter, Clara, a tireless nurse who always looks exhausted, pacing tensely by the dining room window. This wasn't a casual family dinner. It was a coordinated ambush. And I was the only one who hadn't been given the script. Inside, the house smelled of expensive candles and unearned wealth. My daughter-in-law, Fiona, hugged me tightly, too tightly, and immediately poured me a glass of heavy red wine. Eleanor has been an absolute angel helping with baby Leo on her days off, Fiona announced to the room with a brilliant artificial smile. Beatrice nodded solemnly, as if testifying in court. I just smiled and took a sip. I didn't correct her. I had never agreed to regular days off. Julian walked in, laughing too loudly, the way he always does when he's terrified. He immediately began boasting about a massive tech contract he just closed. A number with far too many zeros. I raised that boy on store-brand oats and used textbooks. I know the exact psychological difference between a man who has money and a man who desperately needs you to think he has money. As we walked into the dining room, a small piece of paper pinned under a magnetic clip on the refrigerator caught my eye. It was an elite preschool academy invoice. Non-refundable enrollment deposit due Friday, $6,500. We sat down. The dinner was immaculate. Beatrice talked endlessly about her winter villa. Fiona watched Julian waiting for a cue, and I silently counted the overhead. 2 leased luxury vehicles, a $6,500 pending deposit, and a son who couldn't maintain eye contact with his mother across his own mahogany table. Then the main course was cleared. Julian cleared his throat, squaring his shoulders like an executive preparing a hostile pitch. "Mom," he said, leaning in. "Fiona and I wanted to talk to you about the future. Baby care is astronomical right now. It's nearly $2,500 a month for a licensed facility. We've looked at the numbers. And we need you to step down from your firm early. We simply cannot afford child care. The room fell dead silent. I let out a soft, amused chuckle. The kind of laugh you give when a toddler explains a completely impossible dream. Julian, I said mildly, that's a fascinating joke. You mean to tell me you can't afford childcare on a combined household income of $310,000 a year? Fiona's smile turned razor sharp. It's not about the cash, Eleanor. It's about family. A child shouldn't be left with cold, detached strangers. Not when he has a grandmother who is just winding down anyway. Winding down. I had balanced the books for 4 multi-million-dollar corporations that morning. But to them I was a ticking clock. I looked at the 4 of them, my overextended son, his coiled wife, the self-righteous mother-in-law, and my daughter Clara, who was staring at her plate as if praying the floor would swallow her whole. Before I give you my answer, I said, my voice completely flat, let me make sure I understand the math. I reached for my water glass, leaving the briefcase closed. Because I knew the exact second I unzipped that leather portfolio, their beautiful family dinner would cease to exist. If you've ever sat at a table where people tried to trade your dignity for a favor, hold tight. To understand how we got to this table, you have to understand who I am. I married at 23 and was divorced by 40. When Julian was 12 and Clara was 8, their father walked out for a younger woman who didn't look at financial statements. I was left with 2 children, a heavy mortgage, and a bank account in the double digits. So, I built an armor out of numbers. I took night classes, did bookkeeping by lamplight until my eyes bled, and ensured my children never felt the weight of the water we were drowning in. But Julian remembers those years through a warped lens. To him, I wasn't a mother saving his life. I was a mother who was always at the office. He weaponized that memory to make himself feel better about what he was asking for now. 3 years ago, when they bought this massive estate, the underwriters balked at their debt-to-income ratio. They begged me to sign as a co-signatory and guarantor, and to clear their down payment with a $100,000 personal loan. I trusted them. I drew up a simple promissory note and signed the deed alongside them. I never imagined I'd actually have to audit my own flesh and blood. Fiona rested her hands on the table, mimicking my posture perfectly. Eleanor, let's be entirely transparent here. Strangers watch children for a paycheck. Grandmothers do it out of pure devotion. Leo deserves devotion. Devotion and free labor are 2 entirely different line items, Fiona, I replied. Beatrice gasped softly. In our social circle, grandmothers step up. It's a privilege. Were you paid when you watched Fiona's older cousins? I asked Beatrice directly. Beatrice blinked, flustered. Of course not. It was for family. I noted that. I note everything. I saw Fiona's phone light up on the table. She quickly flipped it face down, but not before a sharp, panicked look passed between her and her mother. It was a rehearsed glance. I just don't comprehend, Fiona sighed, her voice dropping into a weaponized wounded softness, how a corporate ledger can matter more to you than your own grandson's upbringing. What will our community think? A grandmother who prefers a cubicle over a cradle. There it was. The psychological trap they had carefully constructed. The narrative of the cold, selfish, counting old woman who chose spreadsheets over a baby's smile. I felt the immense emotional weight of it. Nobody wants to be the villain in their child's story. But I didn't let that emotion move my hand. Tell me, I said softly, if this isn't fundamentally about money, why did your opening argument rely entirely on your inability to pay? They didn't know that the mortgage verification packet in my briefcase wasn't routine. Banks do not issue emergency restructuring paperwork when a loan is healthy. They issue it when a household is burning through cash. That night, after politely promising them I would take a week to review my personal finances, I drove home in absolute silence. The relief in that dining room when I asked for time had been sickening. They genuinely believed they had one. When I got back to my own home, I cleared my kitchen table, the exact table where I had taught myself accounting 30 years ago, and opened the portfolio. Tab 1 of my custom spreadsheet, their true cash flow. Because I was a legal guarantor, the restructuring packet included their certified pay stubs, tax returns, and monthly liabilities. Their gross monthly intake was roughly $18,000 post-tax. Yet, their outflow was staggering. A $6,500 mortgage, $1,600 in vehicle leases, $900 for a country club membership they never visited, elite fashion subscriptions, and excessive dining. The average cost of high-end infant care in their zip code was $1,800 a month. They didn't have a child care crisis. They had a luxury addiction they refused to trim. If they parked one SUV and paused the country club, the child care costs fit with thousands to spare. Their "we can't afford it" was a bold-faced lie dressed up as parental panic. They simply preferred that I absorb the cost using my retirement years. But as I flipped to the second tab of the bank statements, the numbers stopped telling a story of reckless spending and started revealing something far more sinister. If you've ever had a sinking feeling that the people closest to you were playing a completely different game behind your back, type "I know that feeling" in the comments right now. Because what I found next changed this entire calculation. The psychological warfare began at 7:15 a.m. the next day. Fiona sent a photo of baby Leo covered in breakfast, captioned, "He needs his nana, not a corporate daycare. Please don't abandon him." By noon, another text. "Julian is losing sleep over the Friday enrollment deadline, Eleanor. We are entirely relying on you." I didn't reply. Silence is the ultimate weapon of a forensic auditor. Then my sister called me from 2 states away. "Eleanor, is everything all right? I just saw Fiona's public social media post." Fiona had posted a beautifully vague, devastating paragraph online. It breaks my heart when some people prioritize corporate wealth over family legacy. So incredibly grateful for the true family members who actually show up when a child needs love, rather than hiding behind a calculator. The comments were flooded with crying emojis, painting me as the wicked, detached grandmother. Public shaming is a fascinating tool. It doesn't require facts, only an audience willing to believe the worst. At 4 p.m., my daughter Clara arrived at my house, still in her nursing scrubs, her eyes heavy with tears. "Mom, did you see what they're doing online? They're telling the entire family you're abandoning them," Clara said, her voice trembling. She took a sip of the tea I made her and lowered her voice. "But Mom, there's something else. Something I saw at their house last week when I was setting up the nursery. I wasn't going to say anything, but I can't let them do this to you." "Speak slowly, Clara," I said gently. "Fiona was in the home office," Clara whispered. "She thought I was downstairs. She was on the phone with a luxury real estate agent. She wasn't talking about buying a new property, Mom. She was giving details about your house. She was asking about staging timelines for the spring market." After Clara left, I sat under the glow of my laptop screen until 2 a.m. A real estate agent? I turned back to the bank packet, flipping past the appraisal notices to a supplemental appendix tucked deep inside the paperwork. It was a projected alternate income verification worksheet, a document a borrower submits to prove they have future revenue streams coming in to qualify for an aggressive loan restructure. I read the bolded text at the top of the asset column. Projected rental revenue, supporting properties. There was only one address listed under that column. My address. The 3-bedroom home I had completely paid off at age 62. The home where I had raised my children. It was written into their bank application as a guaranteed rental asset, complete with a projected monthly lease value of $3,200. In the margin, a bank underwriter had circled a specific note in red ink. Asset available Q2, pending family relocation. The relocation was me. I was the line item. The strategy was chillingly clear. They hadn't invited me to dinner to ask for help with a baby. They had drafted an entire financial future where I sold or rented my home, moved into their guest room as a permanent, unpaid domestic live-in, and allowed my lifetime of equity to be swallowed up to prop up their collapsing credit line. And they had called a real estate agent 2 weeks before they ever served me that roast lamb. But there was still one missing variable. I went back to their actual bank statements looking at the microtransactions. For the last 10 months, coincidentally, since the exact month baby Leo was born, there was a recurring outbound electronic transfer of exactly $1,500 on the first of every single month. It was labeled with a generic transaction string, M-Care recur, $1,500 a month leaving their account for child care. While they sat at a table and wept that they couldn't afford a single dollar for a nursery. I didn't get angry. I got methodical. I made one phone call to an old colleague still working within the local banking network to trace that specific transaction routing code. And when she gave me the name attached to that account, the final lock clicked into place. If you think you know whose name was on that hidden account, drop your guess right now. Because when Sunday night rolled around, I didn't bring an excuse. I brought the entire audit. Sunday evening, 6 p.m. The same gated community. The same pristine lawns. They had gone all out tonight. Premium ribeye, expensive linen, and candles. Fiona was wearing pearls, playing the part of the ultimate, gracious daughter-in-law. The entire cast was assembled. Julian, Fiona, Beatrice, Clara, and Clara's husband, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Eleanor, you look radiant, Fiona purred, filling my glass to the absolute brim. We are so incredibly relieved to finally put this matter to rest as a family. Put it to rest? I asked, placing the oxblood portfolio directly onto her pristine white tablecloth. Fiona's eyes darted to the leather folder. You can put your work things in the hallway, Eleanor. Tonight is purely for family. I'll keep it right here, I replied smoothly. You never know when you'll need to verify a specific statement. We didn't even make it to the main course. Fiona was far too impatient. She set her fork down with a sharp click. Well, Eleanor, it's been a week. The mortgage restructuring deadline is hitting the bank system on Monday, and the Elite Academy placement list is closing. We need your definitive affirmation tonight. We need to know you're with this family. I folded my hands over the folder. I have conducted a complete review of the documentation, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Fiona's smile completely vanished. The weaponized sweetness evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp defensive glare. You know, she said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. A decent, loving grandmother wouldn't place a financial ledger over her own grandson's welfare. Beatrice nodded righteously. Julian winced, staring at his steak. I let the insult sit in the candlelight. I let everyone absorb how grotesque it was. Then, slowly, deliberately, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my reading glasses, and put them on. In over 40 years of corporate auditing, no executive had ever survived a meeting once those glasses went on. You're entirely right, Fiona, I said, unzipping the portfolio. Let's leave emotions out of this completely. Let's discuss verified facts. I pulled out 3 clipped packets of paper and laid them out across her linen table. Tab 1, I announced, sliding the first sheet directly in front of my son. This is your verified cash flow. Pulled straight from the bank restructuring packet, I hold as a guarantor. Your combined post-tax revenue is $18,000 a month. Your lifestyle expenses, including 2 luxury leases and an elite country club membership, total over $11,000. High-end child care in this county is $1,800. You don't have an affordability problem, Julian. You have an arrogance problem. You can easily afford a nursery. You simply prefer that I liquidate my lifestyle to subsidize yours. Julian's face turned violently red. Mom, you don't understand our corporate positioning. I understand a balance sheet perfectly. I cut him off, turning to the second page. Tab 2. the actual cost of the favor you are requesting. If I retire 2 years ahead of schedule, I lose $210,000 in gross salary, permanently lower my lifetime Social Security index, and halt my portfolio's compounding interest. Furthermore, full-time infant care at standard market rates is valued at $45,000 a year. You are not asking your mother for a family favor. You are asking me to sign a personal check for roughly $250,000, and you expect me to thank you for the privilege. Fiona slammed her hand on the table. This is utterly psychotic. You are placing a literal price tag on a baby's love. No, Fiona, I said, my voice deathly calm. You placed the price tag on him months ago. I am merely printing out the receipt. Which brings me to tab 3. I laid down the final document, the light catching the traced routing numbers. Every single month for the past 10 months, $1,500 has left your account under the memo line Imcaricur. I had the routing profile traced on Friday. That money is being directly deposited into a private account belonging to Beatrice. Julian froze. He turned his head slowly to look at his wife, the color completely draining from his skin. What? Fiona. You told me your mother was watching Leo for free because we were desperate. You told me we had to scrape together that $6,500 deposit because we were completely broke. Julian, do not do this right now, Fiona hissed, her knuckles turning white. The total variance between your unaffordable corporate daycare and the secret salary you are paying Fiona's mother is exactly $300 a month, I said, letting the silence crush the room. The lie wasn't designed to save the baby, Julian. The lie was designed so that if I stepped in for free, you could stop paying Beatrice, pocket the $1,500 difference, and use tab 4 to save your skin. I slid the final sheet over, the real estate income projection worksheet. This is your restructuring application. You listed my paid-off home as a rental asset to secure a lower interest rate on your debt, listing it as available Q2. You called a listing agent to stage my home before you ever invited me to the dinner where you planned to ask me to give it up. Clara looked up, tears streaming down her face. It's true, Julian. I heard her on the phone weeks ago. Julian dropped his face into his hands, letting out a shattered, broken sound. Fiona stood up so fast her chair screeched against the hardwood. We did what we had to do to protect this estate. For your grandson. And you come into my home to humiliate us with bank paperwork. She reached for her wine glass, her hand shaking so violently that the glass clipped the edge of the rim, shattering instantly. Heavy red wine cascaded across her white linen tablecloth, spreading like an ugly, permanent stain. Nobody moved. Fiona was breathing heavily, furious tears streaming down her face, the tears of a predator caught in a trap, not a person who felt a shred of remorse. I stood up unhurriedly, folded my reading glasses, and tucked them neatly into my blazer pocket. Here is my definitive answer, I said, picking up my portfolio. I will not be retiring. I love my career and I am exceptionally good at it. Furthermore, I will not be signing your mortgage restructuring paperwork on Monday morning. The underwriters will receive my official legal withdrawal notice at 9 a.m. Julian lifted his head, his eyes wild with panic. Mom, if you pull out as guarantor, our credit line resets at an alternate rate. We could lose this house. Then you will sell a house you can't afford, move into a home within your actual tax bracket, and live like normal people do every single day, I said gently. I did it alone with 2 children. You can do it with a combined 6-figure salary. As for the $100,000 down payment loan I gave you, my legal counsel will be sending over a formalized, binding monthly amortization schedule on Tuesday morning. I expect the first payment by the 1st of the month. Fiona let out a bitter, weeping laugh. So this is your ultimate revenge? Money over your own blood. You used money to construct a lie, Fiona, I said, looking her dead in the eyes. I am simply using it to mandate the truth. I will always be Leo's grandmother. But I will never, under any circumstances, be your line item. I turned on my heel and walked out of that house, past the least luxury vehicles, through the iron gates, and drove back to my beautifully quiet, completely paid for life. The restructuring collapsed by Monday afternoon, exactly as the math dictated it would. Without my signature, the bank refused to extend their credit facility. The interest rates reset, and the financial reality they had been running from for years finally slammed into them. By the following spring, their massive estate was officially on the market, listed by the exact same real estate agent Fiona had called to praise my home. They bought a modest 3-bedroom townhouse 2 towns over. The leased vehicles went back to the dealership. The $1,500 monthly payments to Beatrice stopped instantly. It is truly remarkable how fast a sacred family arrangement vanishes the moment it yields more transparency than cash. Julian came to see me alone last April. He stood on my front porch for a long time before he finally knocked. He didn't offer a theatrical apology. He isn't emotionally mature enough for that yet. And I have long since stopped waiting for people to arrive on a schedule that matches my expectations. But he did say one completely honest thing. He looked at me and said, "Mom, I was so terrified of looking like a failure to our friends that I almost did something entirely unforgivable to you." I looked at my son and told him the ultimate truth of the world. Fear explains a great deal of human malice, Julian. But it excuses absolutely none of it. I see baby Leo now on alternating Saturdays. It is entirely my choice and it is my absolute joy. We sit on my porch and we read library books together. The cheap kind. The wonderful kind. I watch him because I adore him with every fiber of my being, not because I have been invoiced for his care. The red wine stain never truly came out of Fiona's expensive tablecloth. Clara told me they eventually had to throw the entire fabric away. Some marks are simply too deep to scrub out. Eventually, you just have to stop setting the table with the people who put them there. Here is what 42 years of forensic auditing and one very expensive Sunday dinner taught me. Real love is an absolute gift. It is never a line item on someone else's budget. That is my truth. They set the table, I brought the math. If you have ever been treated like an asset to be liquidated by the people who claim to love you, let this story be your absolute permission to close the folder, stand up, and walk away. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you the next time.